or this age that we live in. There is a road that this world is on. All right? That this, talking about the dead world, there is a direction, there is a pathway of this world that we're talking about here. Death. And people who are alive, or living people physically, but who are in that world, the dead world, they're walking down a road. They've chosen to walk down that road. There's one destination for that. And he further describes it. It's according to the prince of the air. Now, this can be a little confusing to people. What is the prince of the air? It's kind of a little strangey language there. Well, it's an obvious allusion to Satan. Why is he called the prince of the air? Well, he's called the prince of the world. He's called, he says that he has a kingdom, right, of righteousness. He has been given a domain of authority. Well, why would God do that? It's a difficult question. We're not really in a position to know everything about God, but we know enough about him to know that he has allowed Satan a certain level of operation with limitations. You know, even when he wanted to attack Job, he had to get permission. But I was thinking about this. Why? You know, people will say, why? And the best answer I've got is to, you know, sometimes the best lessons are to see contrasts. Right? You take the worst of the worst, and put them beside the best of the best. And it shouldn't be a hard decision on who you want to follow. Do you really want to follow the guy standing there in a dress, screaming at the top of it, shaking over a delusion full of hatred and wants nothing but to destroy somebody else? Is that the kind of person you want to follow? Why does God allow evil to persist? The only good answer I have is so that good people can see there's a difference. It's not that he's not going to destroy Satan. It's not that he's not going to punish wickedness. He will deal with it, but he is wanting every opportunity. And some people need to see the horror to avoid the destiny. So, the prince of the air. And what happens? Well, people follow him. And they have lived according to him, after his manner, full of hatred, full of rebellion, full of envy, strife, deceit. Well, he's the prince of the powers of the air. And remember that these Athenians, Ephesians, had this strong background of the belief of the spirit world. So yes, there is a spirit world. Yes, there are spiritual forces against us, but there's somebody more powerful who can protect us. And so people need to not live according to the prince of the powers of the air. Now, he explains this. If we're not really sure what he's talking about, he explains it in the next passage. In what way are we influenced by Satan? Well, here it is. Because we partake of the spirit that now works in the sons of disobedience. Now, this is we've made this observation multiple times in the past, that this is a very, very common idiom in both Hebrew and Greek literature in that Far East and Middle East language. The son of something means that you are taking on the attributes of that. So, I read a story one time, a Louis L'Amour story. Remember Louis L'Amour? He wrote a lot of Western fictions, but he also wrote some fiction about the Middle Ages. I enjoyed those too, but I remember in one he was taught. It was like in the Middle Ages and the Muslim world at that time, and there was a story, and they were talking about this one guy, and he called him the son of the lice. Right? That's an insult, right? You are so worthless. You are as worthless as a lice or a louse, right? Well, that's their idiom of you take on the nature of what you are a son of, right? So these were sons of disobedience. So what is this dead world characterized by? Disobedience. Well, that's following the prince of the powers of the air. And notice verse 3, among whom we also all once lived. He's not pointing fingers. I used to be there too. I used to follow Satan. I used to be a son of disobedience. I used to be in the course of this world. Well, what are you talking about, Paul? Were you a wicked, fornicating serial killer? What kind of person were you, Paul? No, he's just disobedient. Yeah, he was doing things that were wrong, but we ought not to attribute him with some kind of vile sin. He says, everything I was doing, I was not violating my conscience. I thought that was the right thing to do, those things. I was disobeying God, yes. And am I the chief of all sinners? Yes. And that's where I used to be. But I didn't think I was there. Here's the deal. You can be dead spiritually and not know it. You can think you're alive and be dead. Right? That's what he's telling. But here's the nature of the dead ones. They were disobedient. They were following Satan. No, I don't follow Satan. Well, you are if you're a disobedient person. If you haven't obeyed the Lord, you're disobedient, and therefore you are following Satan. You are in the pathway that this whole world is bound to. And notice he further describes it in three things. Number one, lusts of the flesh. That is, we've been to survive in this world, we've been given certain desires. These desires facilitate the care of the human body. But everything has been given limits. There's a proper place for those desires, whether they be hunger, reproductive, sexual pleasure. There's limits. Possessions that facilitate our care and shelter and preservation in times of famine and hardship. Oh yeah, there's a place for all those things. But what happens if I decide to go hit somebody in the head and take their things to satisfy my needs? No. Thou shalt not steal. There's limits, right? But people, generally speaking, the course of the world is a world that's just operating according to the lust of the flesh. If whatever makes you feel good, that's the saying, right? Whatever floats your boat. We got all kinds of little sayings for things like this. To each his own. I've heard that before. Well, that's the course of the world. And then he says the desires of the flesh and the mind. This is the core. This is the dead. The dead world is the world that results in trespasses and sins. It's the course of the world. It's following the prince of the air. It's the sons of disobedience. It's those who are operating by the lust of the flesh, the desires of the flesh. The desires here is actually the word that means the will of the flesh. It goes beyond the desire. It's what I choose to do. So I can be driven by lust and become weak and fall. And then there's those who make a choice. I'm going to do this. And it says, I'm going to do this to satisfy the flesh, or even I'm going to do this to satisfy the direction of my mind. This is conscious rebellion, not just slipping because of weakness. This is the course of the dead ones. This paints a very, very dark picture. And so he says that these individuals here in end of verse 3 were by nature sons of wrath, children of wrath. There's that idiom again. Now, the word nature here has been seized upon by those who believe in this idea that you were born lost. You were born sinner. Little baby, come out of the womb, wah, 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 wah. Sinner. As wicked as you could be. That's not what this is talking about. The word nature here is not what we would use to describe human nature. We have a very similar term that you all know very well. We call it in English, in our colloquial language, second nature. Right? You say, man, that guy looks like he was born with a golf club in his hand. Look at the smooth stroke. Now, he wasn't talking about me. By habit, by practice, by giving in and just following this world, that is the nature we have adopted for ourselves. Because we don't even think anything about it, telling a lie. It's just habit. That's how we do. We don't think anything about just telling somebody off. that crosses our lane. Why? Because it's second nature to it. It's the way we've lived our entire life. We've come in, sat down, and made ourselves at home in the dead world. The dead world. And so we, by our practice, by our being comfortable and having a second nature of living this way, Paul includes himself in the choices he made and the disobedience he manifested in his life. I was in the same boat, and by virtue of that fact, I became a child of wrath, a son of wrath. That is a son who deserves God's wrath. We were all there, every single one of us. But, that's the first word of the next verse. But God, being so extremely, immeasurably wealthy, not in gold and silver and corruptible things, but what does God have in abundance? What if you go look in God's, safe, right? His precious treasure. What do you open that door and what do you see in there? Piles and piles and piles of mercy. That's what we're going to explore next week. The mercy of God for the dead world. Because He's going to make us alive. He has made us alive. And let us worship Him today in grace and in thanksgiving that He has made us alive. And we're going to explore the richness of that and then find the motivation to be involved in good works. Good works can wear you out. You can get tired of doing good works. But not if you keep reminding yourself of just how much God has given to you and to me. Oh, this is a thrilling, thrilling passage. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate it so much.